Hi, everybody. I'm Fran Spielman, and with me is a treat, Mary Mitchell, our columnist at the Sun-Times, who is now going to take a step back and enjoy your life a little bit better. Congratulations on a wonderful career.
Thank you so much, Fran. Yeah, it's exciting. It's scary.
What's scary?
It's bittersweet. You know, this has been like my cocoon. I came here in 1990, and I've been here ever since. You know, I never worked for another newspaper. This is what I know. This is the city that I know. This is the work that I know. And so it's kind of scary that knowing that I'm going to wake up on, Thursday morning and I will no longer be Mary Mitchell. I'll be somebody else.
Oh, you'll always be Mary Mitchell. That's never going to be taken away from you. What will you do?
Okay. Well, so far I think the first thing I want to do is catch up with my life. You know, I have 7 grandchildren. I have 3 of them in college. I have one that's going to be going to middle school, and I have several living in different city, different state, and I just want to catch up with them. I want to spend time with them. I want to be there in the present, in the moment with them, and not have to always say, "Oh, I would do it if I can do it. I'll try to do it," and have the energy to still enjoy them.
When I look back on your career, I think of someone who's rare because you had the guts to talk about things that were personal to you and admit your own fallibilities, to take on icons who other people were afraid to touch. Mm-hmm. You've had tremendous courage, and the courage that it took to even get the column in the first place. Where did that come from?
I think it comes from, first of all, I grew up in a large family. It was 10 of us.
And you were the oldest.
And I was the oldest, and so I had to play a role in helping to take care of them. We had to entertain them. We had to keep them together. And
what did you do to entertain them?
Well, we did a lot of puppet shows.
Really?
We did a lot of. I used to write scripts, and I used to let them perform the little plays that I would write. My twin sister was very good with music, so she introduced us to a lot of music. But basically, I had to be a person that took care of other people. I was a caregiver in a way. And I brought that with me in my work career, especially in my journalism career. It was very important to me that I be an advocate. I didn't even know when I walked into the door what an advocate really was. But that's the role that I ended up fulfilling, because I really cared about the little person and the ordinary person. Not the person that had the PR staff, not the icons, not the powerful people, but the person who cannot get someone to answer the phone, or really had a real problem and couldn't get anybody to listen to them. And what I found out over the years, Fran, is that in a lot of instances, it's not that they want you to solve the problem, they want to be heard. Mm-hmm.
That's what most people want.
Yeah, they want you to pick up the phone and listen to their story. And when they get finished telling their story, you can hear the sigh of relief. Mm-hmm. And so those are the people that that's my audience. Those are the people that I spoke to and that really have supported me through 29 years of my career.
Now, you grew up in public housing. Did you stay inside because you were afraid to go outside? Did that help you in in all the reading and writing and stuff?
Well, when you have 9 siblings, you don't have much space, and you're living in public housing, there's nowhere for you to go to be alone. I found out the way to be alone and the way to have space was to read. And so I was a reader. I read everything. My father would come in at night, and I'd be under the covers in the bed with some type of flashlight trying to read a book or finish a book.
I got in trouble.
Yeah, I used to get in trouble for you should be watching the kids, and you're not watching the kids, you're reading a book. So that kind of is the foundation. I tell people all the time when they ask me about how I became a journalist, I tell them the first step is always reading. You have to love the written word. You have to love storytelling. You have to be fascinated by how people put stories together. So that's basically how I got into it. I never knew that I was going to be a journalist. There were no journalists, people come into our school to talk to us. I didn't know any journalists. I didn't think for one moment that I could be in a newsroom or a writer. But what I did know is that I cared about people and I loved to read. And those two things, I think, brought me as far as the newsroom.
But you were a legal secretary for 20 years, right?
20 years.
And then how did it happen that you were able, and you were the first black legal secretary at a major law firm.
Right.
So how did you go from there to journalism?
Well, think about it. When you're a legal secretary, you're doing a lot of transcription, you're doing a lot of writing, you're doing a lot of memos, you're doing a lot of briefs, and all those things come from legal secretary. They're the people that really actually putting those words together and doing the writing. So that was one part of it. But, I grew up in an environment where you had to take care of yourself, I had a child very early at 19 years old. I got married early. I had a failed marriage very early. And so I was responsible for taking care of my children and my family. And so working every day, getting up, having a strong work ethic, trying to do the best that I could at my job, prepared me really to go into the newsroom. Because in the newsroom, think about it, you have to do the same thing. You gotta be a go-getter, you gotta get up early, you gotta be out there, you gotta be the first one on the scene. Those are the kind of things that I learned that my journalism, not my journalism career, but my legal secretary career taught me. Strong work ethic. And I think that's what I brought as an intern to the newsroom.
So you go to Columbia College, you meet P.J. Bednarski and Don Hayner, and they said, come to the Sun-Times. You come to the Sun-Times, and what happened?
So I came to the Sun-Times. I remember the very first day that I walked into the newsroom, I stepped off the elevator, and I felt this total calm. This was over at 401 North Wabash.
Not scared?
Not scared. No, I won't say I wasn't scared. I was scared.
I was scared my first day. I was scared to death my first day.
I came into the newsroom, and the first assignment that they gave me, I couldn't even think about what a lead on a story was. I sat before a blank screen, and I stuttered all day. I just was so excited
writer's
about
cramp
being there.
or writer's block. So
yeah, that. But I loved it. I loved the feel of it, the smell of it, the excitement of it. I remember just being so excited about the fact that I was in the same room with Lynn Sweet. I was in the same room with Tom McNamee. I was in the same room with Don Hayner. I was in the same room with Roger Flaherty and all these people that I had read over the years because the Sun-Times was my newspaper. I knew the bylines. And to think that I was sitting there and beside Leslie Baldacci it just blew my mind.
Now, you came over to City Hall with me, and you hated it in some ways, right?
Right. I didn't like City Hall.
What did you hate?
Well, I didn't like the organization of it, the fact that you were following the mayor around. You get on the bus, you get off the bus, the press releases, the da-da-da. And of course, come on, let's be fair. I was sitting over there with you, so getting a story was not an easy thing to do. I mean, you really had to dig because you had all the stories. You'd been there a long time. I was there really to learn from you how to get stories, how to develop sources. And I remember the one thing about City Hall was that while you were covering major stories, I was digging through documents and boxes and trying to find stories on my own. And the first big story I had over there was the Operation Silver Shovel.
I remember that. I mean, you were driving around and you saw this pile of dirt.
Right.
This dump.
Towering pile
Roosevelt
of dirt.
and Costner.
Right.
What happened? You just happened to be driving by?
I was driving by and I saw it, and then coincidentally someone called me and said their kid had asthma, and that was kind of my first story about this towering dump of dirt and this kid, parents complaining that their children had asthma because of this dumping. So that was the tip of it. I didn't even know what I had uncovered, okay? I started reporting and reporting and reporting, and it got bigger and bigger, and then I started calling aldermen and talking to them about it and finding out that some aldermen working with this mysterious guy named John Christopher.
Little did you know.
Little did I know that this was a major story.
An FBI mole.
An FBI mole.
He was paying off aldermen, right?
Well, he was paying off aldermen, and not only that, every time I would call somebody, they would pretend like they didn't know who this John Christopher was. It was just a crazy story. But I was so green and I was so new that I didn't know what the story really was. And in swoops Carol Marine, I never forget it. She got the actual broke the story because I had gotten that close to the truth of the matter, and that this was an FBI mole that the FBI had to break the story.
Did you feel like you wanted to beat yourself to a pulp for
No,
missing it? How
think
did you feel? What did you learn?
I felt like, I wanted to beat Kel Marine to a pulp for scooping me.
Yeah, but
but
what did you learn from that?
But what I learned from that was, to keep following. Don't give up. Be persistent.
Follow the money.
Follow the money. Follow your nose. If you think something is wrong, you think it's not right, you think that there's something more, don't give up on it. Don't turn your attention away. Don't be distracted. Focus on it. Be a bulldog. That's
and
what I learned.
a ton of aldermen went to prison over that.
Yes, indeed. And I, from that moment on, I became obsessed with writing stories that help make a difference in the community. That was the tip of the iceberg for me.
Now, when you've taken on the Black icons, like Jesse Sr., for example, he took you on, right? I mean, what did you write about him, and what was his reaction that was the worst?
Well, the worst for me was the fact that, I care very much about my community. And then when something happened, and this was, I think the story that you're referring to is Jesse Jackson Sr.'s outside marital affair in which he had a daughter, and that story broke, I think, in another newspaper, but we had to cover it, and I had to write my opinion on it. Well, my opinion was that it was just wrong. It was, basically, he had not only disgraced himself, but he had really disgraced the community, okay, because that was the biggest problem we were having. We were having problems with men fathering children, and then not taking care of them, not being with them, not being able to raise them, and how that impacts the community. And him being the biggest role model in the African American community, how could you actually do this? So I had to write that. And I'm telling you, they tore me to pieces, the community did, for writing that, because he was such a huge icon.
How did they tear you to pieces? What happened?
They wrote negative things about it. They protested me, my name. They did everything but burn me, and they did
tar
everything.
And feather.
Tar and feather me. Because...
Did you get hate mail? Did they protest at the Sun-Times? What happened?
No, I got hate mail. They did not come out and protest at the Sun-Times, and that's only because I think they knew that I was right. There are stories that they did come by and protest at the Sun-Times, but that Jesse Jackson story was not one of them. And it took us a very long time before we could definitely sit across from each other again.
Did he call you and yell at you when it happened?
Well, no, he didn't. But he don't have to call you and yell at you. Other people will do that for him.
Yeah, for him.
Right. And so then
when did you hash it out with him?
It was years.
Really?
Many years later.
And how did that go?
Well, many years later, I ended up going on a tour to the Middle East with him and a group of other journalists. And at that time, that was the first time that we've ever spent any long period of time together. And we never talked about what I wrote, but we knew then that breach, that gap had been, closed.
Okay, now Chance the Rapper also took you on.
That was huge.
What happened there?
So with Chance the Rapper, it was simply a story that I started off. I thought this is a great young man. I was very proud of him that he had won so many Grammys. But then there was an issue. And as a columnist, you can write something very positive about somebody, but you got to tell the whole story. So in my story, I not only just talked about how proud I was of him and his success, but also talked about the fact that he had this court case going on. And I hoped he did the right thing by his daughter and by his baby's mama, because she was not his wife at the time, because he was a role model. Whether he liked it or not, he had been elevated overnight practically into a role model for young African Americans in this city. That's what I wrote. And they tore me to pieces then.
In social media now.
Social media, definitely. It was a horrible experience to be dragged on Twitter for what you write, and for it to be distorted, because most people don't read the whole column. All they're going to do is read a portion of it, and then they're going to form an opinion.
And he took you on personally, right?
Well, I don't know if he took me on personally or not. I didn't pay much attention to that, but I'm sure that he took on the Sun-Times.
Yeah. Yeah. And so how did that end? It didn't?
It didn't end. I mean, they wanted me out. The paper supported me, and we just left it like that.
What gives you the guts to take on these people?
Well, I never think about it as the people. I think about it as the issue, okay? So I write about single parenting. I write about mothers raising kids by themselves. So if the biggest icon
'Cause
in
you
the
did it.
African American community
Yeah.
has a problem and is doing that, I'm going to say something about it. When you think about it, Chance the Rapper was the same issue. It wasn't about me attacking Chance the Rapper. It was about me defending the right for a woman to be taken who has given birth to your child. You shouldn't be trying to get off cheap paying her child support.
Right.
That's just the bottom line. And so it's the issue that I address, not so much the person, but as it is, the response from these icons, whether it's Chance the Rapper or Reverend Jackson or Mayor Daley or anybody else, is that if they think that they can stop you and silence you and make you be quiet, then they won. And I wasn't going to let them do that.
You've also written about your son's struggles. How did that go, and how does that play in your house?
Okay, well, I don't write very much about my family anymore because that's a very hard thing to do. But years ago, I used to write about and share stories about my family and how I'm dealing with my sons and with my daughters. I did write those stories, and in some ways, it helped because it let people know that they were not alone in their own struggles in raising children. You think that gang life and the lure of gang life is something that only happens to poor people. Well, no, I was working at the Chicago Sun-Times, and my son wanted to be into a gang. And why was that? Well, I had the same challenges that other working parents have. How much time are you spending? Who is involved in? Are your eyes everywhere that you can see everything that's going on in the office and accomplish everything that's going on in the office and then still take care of your family? Think about that. That's the ticket that we were sold in our generation, that you can have it all.
Right.
But really, you cannot have it all.
No.
You can have some of it. There are days when I, look back and think, oh, well, if I hadn't been working so hard, this would not have happened or that would not have happened. And there are days that they're the little league games or the dance recitals or the music recitals that I didn't make. And my family sacrificed for that,
LaQuan McDonald, you were one of the few who pursued that, along with the investigative journalist Jamie Calvin. Talk about that a little bit.
So the LaQuan McDonald story really interested me for a lot of reasons. It wasn't, as horrible it wasn't just the 16 shots. It was how this kid was brought up.
Sure.
And his life, the struggles that he faced. And where was everybody when he was growing up? Where was everybody when he was in foster care and he was being moved about and he was in juvenile detention? To me, his life was a metaphor, and what happened to him was a metaphor of what was going on with the African American community. Because on one hand, yes, we had this terrible things that police officers are doing, but what were we doing to ourselves? And that's the kind of stories and the kind of columns that I would write and that would get me in trouble.
Yeah, and you were pursuing it before the tape came out.
Oh, definitely. Someone told me about it. I had a hard time believing that a Chicago police officer fired 16 shots, not at, but into the body of a teenage boy. I had a hard time believing that. And so when I found out about it and it came across my desk that this had happened, I saw the autopsy report, I began to write about it. And I was probably one of the first journalists and mainstream media to write about that case. But I took it a step further. I also wrote about his upbringing. I also wrote about his troubles. I also wrote about the environment that he had grown up in and DCFS role in what happened to him.
As you step back, you look at Chicago, where are we in terms of race relations, and what do we still have to do?
I think it's very, very clear that we still don't have a good understanding of our communities. What I mean by that is that you still have people who are holding on to stereotypes, either white people holding on stereotypes about black and black people holding on to stereotypes about white. What I found out through my career and through my writing, that there are a lot of white people who want to see things improve and want to end the racism and the discrimination that they grew up with. They want to see it end. And I don't think there's a lot of black people who understand that that's the way it is. And so what we're bumping heads right now. We're not really speaking to each other. We're speaking like this right across each other. So that's one of the reasons I'm stepping back, because I think there is a new voice out there. There is a voice that will be able to bridge that gap. There is a voice that will be able to be heard by black people and white people alike.
Who is that voice?
I don't know who that voice is, but I think that voice is coming.
Why do we have a black exodus so bad that we've lost hundreds of thousands of African Americans in this city in the last few decades?
Because black people want the same thing that white people want. They want good schools. They want safe neighborhoods. They want great parks. They want jobs. They want careers. If you don't find that, I mean, that is the reason why black people made an exodus from the South.
Right.
Because they didn't have opportunities. So are you going to sit here and not have anything for your kids, send your kids to bad schools, not be able to provide for them? Nobody wants to do that. So anybody with means, and this is the problem, the people with means, the people with the brain trust, the people who have the ambition and who are productive, they're the ones who are packing up and leaving because they can. Yeah. And that leaves a neighborhood that's in distress. You have the food deserts. You have the lack of proper housing. You have the poor schools. You have the lack of resources for basic recreation and entertainment in these neighborhoods. And that's why are having such a big problem and addressing the violence.
And so the challenge for Mayor Lightfoot?
The challenge for Mayor Lightfoot is going to be holding to not only addressing the lack of resources, but holding the community accountable. Because that's the hard part.
What do you mean?
What I mean is that, yes, we need these things in our community, but on the other hand, we need to do our part. And what is our part? You got to watch the kids. You got to know what they're doing. You got to get them. If I provide free meals and I provide recreation, I got to get up out of bed or leave my home to go and take my child to that. Nobody's going to come and get the child and do it for you. You got to do it. These things, they're very hard to say. Rahm Emanuel, former Mayor Rahm Emanuel, tried to say it, and he was slapped around for dare approaching it. But who's got to say it? Somebody's got to say it.
Can she say it?
I think she has what it takes to be able to say it. She's a black woman. She's a black gay woman. She's a black woman who grew up in an environment in a small town. So I think she has the ability to say it and the platform to say it. The question is, will she be able to say it? Will it always be somebody else's fault? Our community, the black community, cannot survive on that. We have our part to play. We just need you to be in partnership with us. And you do right by us. We need to do right by ourselves.
And how do you want to be remembered? What do you want your legacy to be as a columnist?
Well, that I cared, that I heard you, that I listened, and that where I could help, I helped. And where I could make a difference, I tried to make a difference. I think that's how I want to be remembered. I didn't cover the great stories, the big stories. I covered the stories to me that really matter. And that's the story of people. So that's how I want to be remembered, as someone who cared.
And listening is a lost art in America, in the world, and I'm so glad we listened to you today, because you could talk forever about the stories that you have. Thank you so much, and congratulations on a wonderful career.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all next week.